Driving down Calloway Creek Road, I counted the mailboxes the way I always did coming home from a long week on site. 14 mailboxes from the corner stop sign to mine. I'd helped pour the foundation for 3 of those houses myself, back when Ray Decker was still running the crew, and we were young enough to think concrete burns on your forearms were something to be proud of. I knew every driveway, every fence post, every dog that would bark as my truck rolled past. So when I saw my brother-in-law's Silverado parked in front of my house on a Tuesday afternoon, I didn't think much of it. Hank was like that. Showed up unannounced, usually hungry, always with some story about a buddy who needed help moving or a poker debt that needed explaining. I parked in the garage and went in through the side door the way I always did, steel-toed boots still on, cooler still in the bed of the truck. "Lori?" I called out. Hank's truck is out front. The living room was quiet in the wrong way. Not the quiet of an empty house. The other kind. I turned the corner and they were on the couch, together. Not doing anything when I walked in, but I'd been married 11 years. I knew what I was looking at. Hank stood up. I put my hand flat on his chest and pushed him back down. "Don't," I said. Laurie started crying before she said a word, which told me everything the words were going to say anyway. Her name was Lori Ann Greer when I met her. She was 23 and working the front desk at the Motel 6 off Route 9 while she finished her degree at the community college. I was 28, doing residential framing for Stokely Brothers Construction, living in a rented room above a hardware store and thinking that was fine. Thinking fine was enough. My buddy Dale introduced us at his cousin's cookout. Lori had dark hair and a laugh that came out of nowhere, loud and real and a little embarrassing, and I thought that was the best thing about her, that she didn't care. She laughed when something was funny and she didn't look around to see who noticed. We dated 8 months. Got married in her parents' backyard on a Saturday in October when the maples along the fence were going orange. Her father shook my hand twice at the reception and said, "You take care of my girl." I meant it when I said I would. For a while I did. We were good at the ordinary things, Saturday morning grocery runs. Painting the bedroom twice because she changed her mind about the color and I pretended to be more annoyed than I was. She'd bring me coffee to the garage when I was working on the truck, and she'd sit on the hood and talk about nothing. Her coworkers, a podcast she was obsessed with, what she wanted to do at the backyard. I thought that was marriage. I thought that was how it was supposed to feel. The distance came in slowly. My hours got longer when I made foreman. Her hours got longer when she took the manager position at the insurance office downtown. We ate dinner at different times. We stopped watching anything together. She started going to a Saturday yoga class, then Saturday yoga and brunch after, then Saturday yoga and brunch, and sometimes she'd be gone until 3 in the afternoon, and I was in the garage and I actually thought that was just what happens when 2 people are busy. Hank had been around more and more in the last year. He was Lori's younger brother, 29, divorced once already, worked at the Sunoco station he half-owned out on the bypass. He'd come over to watch games, borrow tools and not return them. I bought a decent set of socket wrenches the previous spring and they disappeared, and I found them in Lori's car of all places, which she said she'd grabbed for Hank and forgotten to drop off, and I believe that because I had no reason not to. I had no reason not to. I had no reason not to believe a lot of things. After Hank left, and he left fast, didn't look at me on his way out the door. I sat at the kitchen table. Lori sat across from me. She kept her hands folded in front of her like she was waiting to be called on in a meeting. "How long?" I said. 7 months, she said. I looked at the table. 7 months. I'd been on a job site in Claremont for the last 3 of those months, coming home weekends when I could. She'd driven up once to bring me some things I'd forgotten, stayed for 2 days, and I'd thought that was her being a good wife. "You want to tell me why?" I said. She started talking. I listened. She said I was never present, which was partially true. She said Hank understood her, which made me feel physically ill. She said it wasn't planned, which I didn't believe, but didn't argue. And then she said something that I've turned over in my head 1,000 times since. I stayed longer than I should have because I didn't want to hurt you. I stood up, got my jacket off the hook by the door, and walked out to the garage. I sat in my truck for a while. Then I drove to Dale's place and told him what happened. He put a beer in my hand and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. I slept on Dale's couch that night and 3 nights after that. The divorce wasn't ugly. Lori didn't want ugly. She wanted to be done cleanly and move on, and I was too exhausted to fight over the furniture. My attorney, a woman named Patricia Morse, who had a framed needlepoint on her wall that said "Document everything," looked through our finances, and told me Lori had been spending more than I'd realized, not on anything obvious, just the slow accumulation of someone who'd already mentally moved out, new apartment deposit that I hadn't known about, car payments I'd been covering while she saved. She planned this more than 7 months ago, Patricia told me. I didn't say anything to that. The house sold in 6 weeks. I took what I could fit in my truck and a storage unit off the highway and drove west into Virginia with a trailer hitch I'd borrowed from Dale in the general sense that staying in Calloway County was not something I was built for anymore. I picked a town called Mableton because I'd done a job there in my 20s and remembered it had a decent main street and a diner that served breakfast all day. I rented a month-to-month room in a house owned by an older man named Gus who asked no questions and charged a fair rate and had a dog that liked to sleep against the front door. I found work with a commercial outfit called Hargrove Build, called in a reference for my old boss, and started driving steel pins into concrete forms for a new medical complex going up outside of town. The nights were long. That's the thing people don't tell you about starting over when you're 41 years old. The days are manageable because the days have tasks, but the evenings have nothing in them, and that's when the inventory starts. Everything you had, everything you didn't notice you were losing, everything you should have said differently. I cooked myself dinner, ate at the counter, watched the news, went to bed, repeated. A man on my crew named Dwayne kept inviting me to his family's Sunday dinners, and I kept turning him down until he stopped asking the way I'd ask and started telling. "I'll pick you up at 5, he said one Friday. "Wear something clean. Eunice cooks enough for 12. Dwayne's wife Eunice was from Louisiana originally. She was a small woman with a loud voice and the specific authority of someone who'd spent 20 years feeding people who would never be grateful enough. The table had their 2 teenage boys, a daughter-in-law who was finishing a nursing degree, and Dwayne's mother who was 81 and still drove herself to church every Sunday. It was the loudest dinner I'd eaten in years. Somebody knocked over a glass and nobody made a big deal of it. Dwayne's mother asked me 3 times where I was from, and 3 times seemed equally satisfied with the answer. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months, which was that I didn't need to be anywhere but where I was. I went back the next Sunday. And the one after that, about 3 months in, I was at the hardware store on a Saturday, the good one, not the chain, when a woman came in through the side door with a broken screen door hinge and a look on her face like she'd already been to 2 other places and gotten the wrong answer. She was holding the hinge out in front of her like evidence. "They keep telling me this is discontinued," she said to no one in particular. "It's not," I said. She looked at me. I probably should have let the store employee handle it, but the store employee was 17 and on his phone. "The manufacturer changed the product number in 2019, I said. "It's the same hinge, just filed under the new code. Should be in the 3rd aisle. She stared at me for a second. "How do you know that?" "I've been in a lot of hardware stores," I said. Her name was June. She told me that in the parking lot, after I'd helped her find the hinge and an additional bracket she hadn't realized she needed, and after she talked me through a screen door repair problem that had apparently been driving her unreasonably crazy for 2 weeks. She'd moved to Mableton the previous year for a teaching position at the middle school's 6th grade science. Her husband had died 3 years before of a cardiac event, sudden and young, and she was still in the particular aftermath of that. The stage where people have stopped checking on you and life has resumed its ordinary shape around an ordinary-looking hole. "I'm sorry," I said, in the parking lot. "It's all right," she said. "I mean, it's not. But I've gotten better at carrying it." We had coffee the next Thursday. Then dinner 2 weeks after that. It was slow, which was right. She laughed differently than Lori had. Quieter with her eyes more than her mouth. She asked good questions and listened to the answers without planning her response in the middle of me talking, which sounds like a small thing and is not a small thing at all. I told her about Lori and Hank on our 4th or 5th time out. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just nodded and said, "That's a particular kind of hurt. The people you trusted most being the same people." "Yeah," I said. "My husband never hurt me that way," she said. "But losing him hurt me in every other way, so I think I understand something about the inventory you do at night." I looked at her across the table. "When there's nothing to do and everything to think about," she said. "That's exactly it," I said. "We were together 2 years before I asked her to marry me. I asked her in her kitchen while she was making soup, which was not romantic by any standard, and she said yes while she was still holding the wooden spoon, and we both stood there in the middle of her kitchen laughing at how undignified it was and not caring at all. We had a small wedding. Dwayne was my best man. Her sister came in from Oregon. Gus, the landlord who'd asked no questions, sat in the third row and cried, which I did not expect and which got me. June's daughter Wren was 12 when we got married. She'd been quiet around me at first, careful the way kids are when they've lost one parent and don't know what to make of the next person their surviving parent brings home. I didn't push. I fixed things around the house when they needed fixing and drove her to soccer practice when June had late meetings and made pancakes on Saturday mornings without making a production of any of it. By the time we got married, Wren and I had a kind of rhythm. Not father and daughter exactly, not yet, but something real. We had a son the following year. June named him after her father, a man I'd only known from photographs and stories. Callum. From the moment Callum arrived, Wren became a different version of herself, devoted and bossy in equal measure. She read him picture books with tremendous authority. She corrected my technique when I was burping him. I told her I'd been doing this longer than she had, which was not technically true, and she gave me a look that was entirely her mother's. We were good. That's what I want to say. We were genuinely good. I heard about Hank through Dale, the way I heard most things. Hank and Lori had lasted about 9 months after the divorce. She'd ended it, apparently. Then Hank lost his share of the Sunoco station in some kind of dispute with his business partner that involved lawyers and a lot of bad decisions. He was working at the auto parts store now. The last Dale had heard, he was living with their mother. Lori had remarried, a man she'd met through work. Dale said they seemed fine. Good for her, I told him, and meant it more than I expected to. I hadn't spoken to Lori since the divorce papers were signed until she called on a Wednesday afternoon, 6 years after I'd found her on that couch. June was at school. Callum was down for a nap. I was in the garage, and her name came up on my phone, and I stood there looking at it for 3 full rings before I picked up. "I heard you remarried," she said. "I did," I said. "I'm happy for you," she said. She didn't sound unhappy. She sounded like someone who has worked her way to a place and wants you to know she got there. I wanted to say, she stopped. I handled things in a way that was wrong. What happened with Hank? The way I let things get to that point. I'm not asking anything. I just wanted to say it. "Okay," I said. "That's it," she said. "What else would you like me to say?" A pause. "I guess I thought you'd be angrier." "I was," I said. "I'm not anymore." I don't know if that was the right thing to say or the complete thing. But it was honest. I put the phone in my pocket and went back to what I was doing, which was fixing a hinge on a cabinet door. The same type of hinge, I noticed, that I'd first helped June find in the hardware store that Saturday. I don't know if that means something. I think maybe it does. June and I had Callum, and then 3 years later we had a girl we named Rose after nobody in particular except that June said it was a name that sounded like beginning again, and I thought that was right. Wren graduated high school and then college and became a physical therapist in Raleigh. She called every Sunday. When Callum was in his phase of being terrified of the dark, Wren, who was 17 by then and had every reason to be too old for this kind of thing, made a laminated star chart with him and hung it in his room and explained the constellations in the same authoritative voice she'd once used to read him picture books. He slept fine after that. She texted me a photo of it at 11 at night. "Older sibling magic," she wrote. I saved that text. June taught 6th grade for 12 years. Then one morning she woke up with a headache that didn't behave like headaches behave. The diagnosis took 3 weeks. The tumor was located in a way that meant treatment was possible, but the treatment was brutal, and June went through it with the same quiet economy she brought to everything else, not pretending it wasn't hard, not performing bravery, just handling the thing in front of her. On bad days, she let me sit with her. On worse days, she told me to go do something useful, which was her way of protecting me, which I let her do because she needed to. I called Dwayne from the hospital parking lot the night of the first scan results. I sat in my truck the way I'd sat in my truck 11 years before in a very different kind of darkness. Dwayne didn't say much. He just said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." And he was. June fought. That's the word people use because there's no better one. She went to every appointment. She asked the doctors real questions. She still made Callum's lunches on the morning she felt well enough to be up, and she cut the crusts off in a diagonal even though he was 10 by then and past the age of caring about crusts, because it was what she'd always done, and she was not going to stop. She was in remission for 14 months. Then she wasn't. I am not going to describe those last weeks in detail. I don't have the right words, and I don't believe anyone does. What I will say is that Rose was 6, and Callum was 13, and Wren came back from Raleigh and stayed. And we were all in the house together, and June was very clear-minded almost until the end. And one afternoon she held my hand and said, "I want you to know I haven't missed a single day." "Of what?" I said. "Of this," she said. "Of us." I did not hold it together. She rubbed the back of my hand with her thumb until I did. At her funeral, Wren spoke. She was steady in the way people are when they've made a decision in advance to hold themselves together for someone else's sake. She talked about her mother's laugh, about the soup she made every Sunday, about the way she argued with referees at Callum's soccer games in a manner that was deeply ironic for a 6th grade science teacher who graded kindness as a separate category on her rubric. And then Rose spoke. Rose was 6 years old and wore a dress she had chosen herself, which was purple and had a small stain on the hem that I hadn't noticed until we were already in the parking lot. She stood at the microphone in the fellowship hall. We'd had the service at a church June liked but didn't formally belong to. And she unfolded a piece of notebook paper, the kind with the wide lines, and she read what she had written in large, careful letters. "My mom smelled like the soap in her bathroom. She let me stay up late on Fridays, but not Saturdays because Saturday you have to be useful," she said. She knew all the names of clouds. My dad cried in the shower, but he thought I didn't know. My mom would want us to have cake. There is cake in the other room, and I think we should go eat it. People laughed, which was the right response and which June would have wanted. I went to the men's room for 2 minutes. Wren found me when I came out and put her hand on my arm and said, "She's all right. She's more all right than either of us." She was right. Hank died 2 years later. Car accident, no one else involved. I went to the service because his mother was still alive and I'd always respected her. I stood in the back. Lori was there. We nodded to each other. Not much else needed to happen. His mother found me on the way out and held my hand in both of hers. She said, "You were always a good man, James. I'm sorry about how things went." "I'm all right," I said. "I really am." And I was. That's the thing. That's the whole thing. Rose is 14 now. She has her mother's way of asking questions. Direct, with actual curiosity, waiting for the answer. She wants to be a marine biologist or a chef, and most days thinks she can probably do both. Callum is in his 2nd year of college studying civil engineering, which I didn't push him toward. Which is maybe why it pleases me so much. He calls on Sunday mornings the same time his sister Wren calls, and sometimes they call at the same time and I have to tell one of them to hold on, which is the best problem I've ever had. Dwayne and Eunice still do Sunday dinners. Dwayne's mother passed away 4 years ago at 85, still driving herself to church. I sit where I always sit at that table. Some mornings I make soup the way June showed me. Nothing fancy, the same simple way she'd always done it. And I eat it standing at the counter because the kitchen table is not always the right place to be. On those mornings, I don't think about what's missing. I think about the inventory going the other direction. What's here, what held, what came back in a shape I didn't expect. There's a hinge on the cabinet in the kitchen. I replaced it years ago. Every time I open that door without deciding to, I think about a woman in a hardware store with a broken screen door and the wrong part number and a look on her face like she'd been getting the wrong answer all day. I got very lucky. Not the way luck usually means, the other kind. The kind that meets you halfway, if you show up for it. I've thought a lot about what actually happened to me and why things ended up the way they did. Not in a dramatic way. More like the way you think about a structural problem in a building, tracing it back to where the load shifted, where the foundation started separating from the frame. Lori didn't become someone who would do what she did overnight. And honestly, looking back, I wasn't paying the kind of attention that would have caught the slow drift. I was working more. She was pulling away. We both let the ordinary life we'd built become something we were just moving through instead of building together. That's not an excuse for her choices. It's just the truth about how people end up in the same house with nothing between them. What I know now is that actions compound, the small ones most of all. Every time I chose the job over the conversation. Every time she chose the distance over the honesty. Neither of us was doing anything catastrophic on any given day. But over years, all those small choices added up to 2 people who had stopped choosing each other at all. And then Hank was there, and it was easier for her to let it happen than to do the hard work of saying what was actually wrong. That's the thing about integrity. Not the word people put on motivational posters, but the real version. It means being honest about what you're actually feeling before you act on it in a way you can't undo. Lori didn't have that. I don't know that I was much better in the ways I went silent instead of speaking, I like to think I handled what came after with some dignity, but I'm not sure I handled the marriage itself that well. I just handled its ending better than she did. What I learned from June was something different. June had lost the person she loved most in the most final possible way, without warning, without any chance to fix anything or say what was left unsaid. And she carried that. She didn't close off. She didn't decide that the inventory was too painful to take. She kept showing up to her life. Her students, her daughter, her Wednesday nights with friends, a screen door that needed fixing. And that's how I found her. Not because she was looking, because she was present. That's the part I think about most when I think about what intelligence actually means. Not the kind that helps you solve problems at work, but the kind that helps you understand what a moment actually is while you're still in it. June had that. She knew what we were building together, and she told me so in ways both small and direct. And I was lucky enough by then to hear her. Rose is 14, and she asks hard questions, and she doesn't let me give easy answers. Callum calls on Sunday mornings and sounds more like himself every week. Ren sends me texts at 11 at night about things that matter to her, and I read every one. That's the life I have. It didn't come from waiting for things to turn around. It came from leaving a place that wasn't working, driving into a state I barely knew, taking a room from a man who asked no questions, showing up to Dwayne's Sunday dinners until they felt like my own. Resilience isn't a big dramatic moment of deciding to be strong. It's just showing up for the next ordinary thing in front of you. And then the next one. Until one Saturday you're standing in the hardware store and someone walks in with the wrong part number and a look on her face that you recognize, and you have just enough sense left to say something. That's all it ever is. Enough sense to say something.